Hi everyone, this is Jeff.
And this is Russ.
When we first started Home on the RNG, we began it as a series of videos, and we produced quite a few before we realized it really works better as a podcast.
Whoops-a-doodle.
So we apologize if any of these early episodes have any visually heavy references that don't transfer to the audio medium.
Whoops-a-doodle.
Thanks for listening. Hey everybody!
Hello.
20 episodes of Home on the RNG.
I have not taken off this Batman shirt in the longest time.
18 games we've played so far. 18 games.
Yeah. And not to mention all of the games that I've just played for...
Well, yeah, I've played other games
for
as well.
fun over
but
here.
18 reviews we have done.
I don't have a lot going on in my life, do I?
You joined a game man's board game club and a book club.
Young adult novel.
Yeah, see, you're doing fine.
Okay.
So today we're going to talk about some of the tropes we've experienced over the last 9 games. We're going to talk about which game was our favorite, which game was our least favorite, and which game we found the most surprising. Unfortunately, since we're talking about 9 games, we're going to be using this sheet of paper a few times. The 9 games we played in this last batch were Super Mario RPG. Remember that one?
I remember it, yeah.
You had to play it twice?
I did have to play it twice. I almost never captured footage for a game ever again.
Lufia 2, one of your favorites.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Phantasy Star 1, a game that I enjoyed more than I was expecting to, considering it's an isometric dungeon crawler.
Yeah.
And that's really not my jam. Lunar 1,
Mm-hmm.
for the Sega CD, a system which I never played before. Mother 1, a game that I never beat before despite my massive Earthbound fandom. I feel like I'm talking about all of these. Dragon Quest 2, which you have something to say about?
We played it.
Okay. Skies of Arcadia.
Oh my god. Talk about this is the one time that I get to say I never played that game before.
And aren't you glad you have
And it
now?
was wonderful.
Final Fantasy 1. Yeah,
that happened.
And Trails in the Sky. Really, we played a lot of games that you love on here.
We did.
And we played a lot of good games on here. Like, looking over this list and trying to pick the worst game was actually a little difficult for me. But we're not here to talk about that yet.
Nope.
We're going to talk about tropes first. And what I've done here is I included all the tropes that we had in our last batch, and then I added a couple that we encountered here. So, by the time Home on the RNG is finished, this trope list will be like 500 items long.
Yeah.
The first trope we had... Actually, why don't you go ahead and do the first one?
Okay, our first trope is going to be, well, that's a bummer, priests saving your soul and your game. And we only had one this time. We only had Lufia 2.
It was more prevalent last time.
It really was.
And it sounds like something that's in more games, but only once did we encounter a priest that saved our soul and our game. But on that train of thought, last time at least half of our games fell into this trope. And this time we had 0 games that allowed you an opportunity to join the dark side, where the enemy actually said, "Come join us," and you actually got to say yes or no. It happened about 4 times last time.
Yes, it did. Yeah.
0 times here.
Yeah, certainly. My take on that is that we played a few more modern games this time, and it just makes sense.
Well, and I think that modern feel also affected the next trope.
Right. Yeah, the next trope, that's true. The next trope is having ancient robots in a fantasy setting. We only encountered 2, both, well, Dragon Warrior / Quest 2 and Final Fantasy 1.
Now, Russ pointed out before we started filming that he thought Legends of Heroes Trails in the Sky should be in here because there are ancient robots in that.
But it's not really a fantasy setting.
That was my counter-argument.
It's really a steampunk setting.
So, there were more games on here that had robots, but none of them were inexplicably in a fantasy
They weren't
setting.
true dragon,
Next, we have the surprise boss. I like to use Final Fantasy IV as an example of this particular trope, if any of you, whoever's familiar with that, because the game makes it feel like the whole time you're going to fight Golbez.
Mm-hmm.
We're chasing Golbez. Golbez is murdering people. We're going to get Golbez. Then right at the very end, Golbez goes, "Oh, I'm cured of my evil. I was controlled by Zemus the whole time." So you're like, fine, we're going to go kill this Zemus guy. You walk up and watch people murder Zemus, and you're like, oh, I guess the day is saved. Then Zoromus shows up and says, "I am your true foe." So it's that feeling of the story leads you towards one villain, and then the end boss is actually this other one. As opposed to, say, Final Fantasy VII.
Right.
Where it's Sephiroth the whole time.
100% after Sephiroth.
So, we encountered 3 games that had a surprise boss. Phantasy Star 1, because you thought you beat the game. You go talk to the mayor, and no, you have not beaten the game yet. Dragon Quest 2.
Right.
And Trails in the Sky.
Right.
Where all of a sudden, it's a robot battle.
Yeah. Which is pretty endemic of the Trail series. And I would say, yeah, and that's interesting too, because that's a recurring thing that you see in Trails, and it's a recurring thing that you see in basically every Dragon Quest going forward.
Yeah, the first one was not that way.
The first one was not that way, but starting from 2 onward. Okay, so our next trope is going to be the silent protagonist.
Something that you would think is ubiquitous, right?
Right.
All JRPGs have silent protagonists. Except not so much.
Not so much, and it's not a favorite of mine. A silent protagonist can be good in certain situations. It's not my favorite.
Well, the idea behind a silent protagonist is to allow you to project yourself into the main character, which is fine when it's done well, but many times the fact that the protagonist is silent kind of becomes a roadblock. You can actually feel like, as they were writing this, they encountered this problem.
We had silent protagonists in Super Mario RPG, which makes sense.
Although they went out of their way. First of all, they called attention to the fact that he was a silent protagonist, and then they had him miming. And like,
I did like the miming.
It was, I think they played with the silent protagonist.
Yeah. Mother 1. Dragon Quest 2, but that's basically every Dragon Quest. And Final Fantasy 1, which...
where all 4 heroes were silent.
They were all silent, no personality behind anybody whatsoever.
You had to assign it to them yourself.
And I think that's what I dislike about silent protagonists, is that they don't have... I guess because I was never like a D&D player or into any of that, I don't really want to have to do the work of creating my character's personality.
We actually skipped one.
Did we?
We went out of order.
Well...
The final boss having multiple forms.
Oh.
This is also another standard trope. You're fighting the end boss, you cut him down, and he goes, "Oh, but that was not my final form." Blah. So we encountered 4 games with that. Again, Super Mario RPG, Lunar 1, Skies of Arcadia, and Legends of Heroes Trails in the Sky. All had a boss with multiple forms. This one is a new trope that I've added.
And the multiple forms, I feel like, is something that we actually see more of now.
I think it's expected.
It's absolutely expected.
It'd be weird if you didn't get it. Yeah. So this is a new trope that I added based on how often we were seeing it in this batch of games.
Oh, I like this one. So it's a fight that you're supposed to lose. So scripted battle.
And in this case, I even noted who you're supposed to lose to.
We had Super Mario RPG, had Yadovich. He was the guy with the pole that you fought at sea, right?
I believe so.
Yeah. Lufia 2 had Gades, or Goddess. I say Gades.
Yeah.
He was one of the Sinistrals. And that was really early in the game. I remember playing that when I was a kid, and him killing me and thinking, like, how am I supposed to do this? I think I reset the game a couple of times.
Yeah.
Phantasy Star 1 had the Succubus. I don't even really remember her.
She attacks you in your dreams.
Oh, okay. And then Mother 1 had the Giant Killer Robot, Giant Killer Robo. and Skies of Arcadia had Ramirez.
I think a fight you're supposed to lose is interesting from a story perspective, but I hate it as a gamer because I go into it throwing everything I have. As soon as I realize this fight is way over my head, I go into this thing throwing everything I've got at it, only to find out when I die. And by the way, like Russ, I'll probably reset it multiple times before I go ahead and let myself die and find out, I was supposed to die.
Right.
I love it as a storyteller. I hate it as a gamer.
Yeah. Because as a gamer, you feel so defeated.
And I will...
You get the same feeling.
Which is the point.
Defeat.
That's what they're trying to give you. And I will point out that I don't know if it's true of all four of these, but often when it's a fight you're supposed to lose, you can win. It's just almost impossible.
Right. What I like is, and off the cuff, I cannot think of any specific examples, but when you encounter one of those battles and you do win it, and the game will like give you a special item or something if you win it. Oh, example would be Lufia 3 on the Game Boy Advance. You're intended to lose the first battle with Gades there, but if you do, you get, I think it's a sword. It's either a sword or a piece of armor so strong that you're like unstoppable for 2/3 of the game.
See, that's fair.
That I like. I like that, and I like, this is a game we haven't even played yet, but Final Fantasy 2/4, I like its scripted battle.
True.
In Mount Ordeals.
Another new one that I added, and this is our last trope, gambling minigames. Because these have snuck into the JRPG genre for some reason.
Mm-hmm. Now they're so popular.
The game you're playing is not enough. We have to have a little tiny game within the game.
Right.
Dragon Quest series in particular does these. Because they have casinos.
Dragon Quest has gotten outrageous with this.
We had 4 gambling minigames. Super Mario RPG, in addition to all of its minigames, actually had a gambling game. Lufia 2. Lunar 1 had a couple of blackjack players you could play with.
Right.
And then Dragon Quest 2, the lottery game is basically a slot machine. So those are the tropes that we encountered in this last batch of 9 games. And now it's time for Russ and I to find out that we pretty much agree on everything. We might not. We might not on this list, because I know some of Russ's favorite games are on this list.
Yeah.
So let's do the worst game first.
Oh, okay.
In these 9 games, let's talk about the game we disliked the most. I said going in, it was kind of hard to pick a worst game because I don't think any of these games were necessarily bad. They were flawed or products of their time.
Yeah.
But I don't think any of them were actually bad. I did finally pick one. I picked Dragon Quest 2. And I picked it because of the utter lack of narrative, and even you really had no idea what you were supposed to do. You wandered the world to pick up artifacts, and like, oh, I guess I'm supposed to get that. I guess I'm supposed to get that. I guess I'm supposed to get that. Oh, here's a boss. I guess I'll fight him. It was very unfocused and undirected. Even more so, I would say, than Final Fantasy, because at least in Final Fantasy, you could see you were fighting to restore the elements. You know, you beat this boss, and you got the fire crystal working again. So there at least was a sense of progression there, as opposed to, well, now I've picked up this sword. Okay. So I don't hate Dragon Quest 2, but of these 9 games, I would say it was my least favorite.
Aww.
How about you?
I pick Final Fantasy 1. And it all boils down to the combat. It all boils down to the magic system that I hate, the fighting 9 wolves and not hardly being able to multi-target anything. It's I've said it before, but there's 2 types of challenging games. There's challenging games that are fun, that are really supposed to test your strategy ability. And then there are challenging games that are just frustrating because you're like, how much longer do I have to walk around in this dungeon, constantly being accosted by groups of monsters that are taking me like 4 to 5 minutes a piece just to get through it, for me to take 5 more steps, and I'm already lost in a dungeon. So the combat, to me, just really pushed that over to the edge, that it was the most excruciating game to play. And as someone that likes grinding, which I've talked about, I like grinding to get my characters a little bit stronger. Because the battle system is so tedious, the grinding isn't even fun. Like, sometimes I can just lay back, grind in an RPG, watch a little TV show on the side. Not in Final Fantasy 1. It's just so excruciating. And the cons that you talk about in Dragon Quest II about just sort of wandering around the world and not really having a sense of direction, well, I liked that in that there was a sense of exploration. I didn't really feel that in Final Fantasy.
Sure.
I just felt like I don't want to get in this ship because I'm going to be attacked by sharks and sahagins and all of these monsters, and I'm going to have to fight my way across this ocean.
Now, I will say this. In our last special, we picked Arcana as our least favorite because it deserved it. In this one, I'd like to say, in defense of both the games that we picked, both of them, their problem is that they were a product of their time.
Right.
More than anything,
yes.
Their greatest sin now is just being old.
Yeah.
And we understand that. We get it. But we still had to pick one.
Yes.
You know, and we're basing it off of, I just played it, did I enjoy myself? You know, we're not framing it in, I'm 8 years old in front of an NES.
Right, exactly.
Because it's too hard to factor in nostalgia and still have a serious conversation. It doesn't work.
Right.
So the best we can do is talk about how we felt playing these games now, and we understand that people out there could have very different memories of playing this game, and that's fine. You get to have your own opinions. That's all these are.
Yeah,
it's just...
And you're absolutely right. I don't dislike Final Fantasy 1.
No,
but
I don't dislike Dragon Quest 2, but I had to pick which of these games I enjoyed playing the least.
I only picked it because we played, I feel, such a good batch of games this time.
We did.
That Final Fantasy was the only one on my list where I found myself having moments of like, I just need to cheat to get through it.
Our next category, I can't even guess what Russ is going to pick for this. And I added this last time just so we could talk about Great Greed again. This is the most surprising game. This is the game that surprised us the most when we were playing it. It can be positive or negative.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's just what game defied your expectations. For me, it was Lunar 1. I'd never played on Sega CD before. And so it defied my expectations in two different ways. First of all, I thought, hey, CD-based, so it's going to be more like PlayStation level. Mm-hmm. And what I got was a game that could have easily been on a Super Nintendo, except for maybe the bits of voice acting.
Yeah.
And despite what I see everybody say online, I was not impressed by the voice acting. I thought it was kind of pathetic.
Well, it was. But people online, I think, are talking about the remakes.
Okay, that might be it. It might be the remakes, because I see people praising the voice acting. I'm like, it was there.
It's the remakes.
So, on the one hand, I was surprised that it wasn't more advanced, and that's on me because I'd never seen a Sega CD. I thought, it's going to be a PlayStation-style game, right? No,
we weren't there yet.
No. But on the other hand, it was also surprising because it was a very enjoyable game to play. It was just pleasant. It was comfortable. It was kind of... See, I'm going to use this term, and I'm going to sound like I've got my head up my own ass using this term. It was sort of a platonic ideal of JRPGs. It delivered on every cylinder exactly the experience I hoped that it would. It's not the best game that we played, by any stretch. We played better games. But I had zero complaints about it overall. It delivered exactly the experience I was looking for in a JRPG. So I was both surprised that the quality wasn't greater from a developmental standpoint, and then I was very pleasantly surprised at the experience overall. So I'm going to say Lunar 1, the most surprising game for me, and I'm really looking forward to Lunar 2.
Yeah, that's a very astute answer.
Yes. What was the most surprising game for you?
Mine is way more pedestrian. The most surprising one was the one I hadn't played, Skies of Arcadia.
And why was it surprising?
It was surprising how much I loved it. I mean, I had heard people sing the praises of it for years and years and years and years, for 15 years or whatever. And I thought...
And it lived up to the hype.
And it lived up to the hype. And it was kind of what you were saying about Trails in the Sky, that you hate it when people gush about something because you're scared. You know, I hear all these people gush about it, and then I'm scared. Oh, I'm not going to love it as much as they did. It's going to be this. It's going to be good.
It'll be
it's
fine.
It's going to be forgettable.
I'm going to come out. I'm going to say, it was fine, and they're all going to dump on me for no reason.
It'll be good, but it'll be forgettable in the sea of games, and it wasn't. It's not forgettable. It's probably now in my top 10 top 10 RPGs of all time.
I think we'll do another one of those videos, not anytime soon, but eventually after we go through many more JRPGs. It might be worth revisiting our favorites.
And it kind of what you were saying about Lunar, that it sort of hit all the right notes for me. I don't know what to say about it. It was just great. My answer is more pedestrian just because I was surprised how much I loved it.
I actually thought it had a chance to be the best game for you, your best game selection. Because I'll say this, moving on to best game, I did pick Skies of Arcadia. I had not played it before, and I was shocked at how good it was, and especially shocked to find out that that's the end of it. No sequels, no spiritual sequels. The characters were great, the story was great, there were all sorts of innovations and added mechanics.
Yeah, that is something I was surprised by, honestly, that we're done at one game.
So I picked Skies of Arcadia as the best game that we've played in this batch. For a lot of the reasons Russ described. I also hadn't played it before. But even just, we talked about it in our review, the fact that they had the characters have expressions on their faces added depth to the characters.
No stupid love triangle.
No.
Thank you so much for no stupid love triangle.
Guys and girls being buddies. I love it when I see that because I have that in my life and I feel underrepresented.
Ika and Pino
as a middle-class, straight, white, male, cisgendered, I feel underrepresented with my life.
Okay, Chris Pratt.
Okay. So, that was my best game for a lot of the reasons he said. It blew me away.
It was really good.
So, out of these 9 games, Russ, what was your best game?
Mine's not unsurprising. I considered saying that it was Skies of Arcadia, but ultimately I'm going to go with Trails in the Sky.
Now, if I had left out most surprising as a category, would that have made it harder to make your choice? Did you feel?
Oh, yes.
Did you feel like as long as I can award Skies something, it's okay?
It would have been more difficult.
Okay.
Yes, because in this way I can represent both games.
Yeah.
Because I love both of them, and I feel like I love them both equally, and part of, it's probably unfair, but part of the reason I chose Trails as my favorite, I am projecting onto what I know about the rest of the series.
Well, and what's interesting is before we even began this project, I knew Lufia 2 was your favorite game, your favorite JRPG, period. And we played it in this group, and yet you're picking 2 others over it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Well, I find that
Lufia
interesting.
2 is not my favorite JRPG ever.
I don't know why I thought it was.
How could you think it was? Earthbound is my favorite JRPG
Well, you have to exclude Earthbound.
Okay. No,
Everything's
I like
to
plenty
Earthbound.
of games more than Lufia. I mean, I love Lufia, but I like so many games. Anyway, but I just picked Trails because it's for all the reasons that I said in my Trails review. I picked it because I feel like I know those characters on a level that I don't think any human should feel like they know fictional characters.
I feel the same way about, and you even said that in the review, I feel the same way about the characters in Persona 4 Golden.
Right, yeah.
Like, those are my friends
and
now.
And to me, Trails has the same experience. They are like my friends, and the reason it kind of edged out Skies as well is because, unfortunately, there is only one Skies of Arcadia game.
But you're cheating a bit now.
I know, and that's what I'm saying, is you get to follow these characters and learn even more about them over the course of many games.
But the Skies of Arcadia characters went to war. You got to see them again in Valkyria Chronicles.
Oh, there you go. But yeah, I think it should really be no surprise that Trails is my favorite. I'm glad you did both categories so that I could sing the praises of.
Yeah, I think I'm leaving most surprising. It's been effective. It's a nice wild card.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And what's funny
you're right, it can be good or bad.
But both times we've used it for something good.
Because I haven't really been surprised by the terribleness of anything yet.
Arcana.
But I wasn't surprised by that.
Actually, going back to the first batch of games we played, you and I were both a little surprised by the horribleness of Breath of Fire 1.
Yes, I was, especially because
And I think
didn't
you might have brought
remember
that up in the most surprising. You might have mentioned that.
I just hadn't played Breath of Fire 1 in so long, and I was like, this has way too much content that is not fun.
But we played a solid batch here of games. These were good. When the lowest points are Dragon Quest II and Final Fantasy 1.
Right.
Those are the lowest points. That's a good batch.
Right.
Because there are certainly much worse games out there. And maybe we'll discover them in our next batch.
Maybe we will. I'm a little nervous.
So we have so many more games coming up. Next time, Russ has selected for us Final Fantasy Legends 2 for the Game Boy. So that's what we're kicking off the next batch with.
Exciting.
So we will see you guys there.
Bye.
Home on the RNG is a presentation of Mad Centaur Productions. You can find Jeff on youtube.com/Centaur Productions or on Twitter @JeffCentaur. You can find Russ on Twitter @RussMac25. Thank you for listening, and remember, it's dangerous to go alone. Take this podcast with you.